Good evening and welcome. I'm very pleased tonight to be able to welcome one of Ithaca College's graduates, a person who makes us proud to say that we go to Ithaca College and our graduates will be graduates someday at the School of Communications. The woman we are about to listen to and discuss some of the media with is a woman who has made her career in Houston, Texas, and now in Philadelphia at KYW, Channel 3, and Eyewitness News. It is my pleasure and honor to present to you Jessica Savitch. Jessica?
Thank you. It is a pleasure and honor for you. It is something that I never thought was going to be accorded to me. To be back in the school from which I graduated, able to sit here and talk about an industry I never thought I was going to be able to get a chance in is almost amazing. That it happened in 7 years is even more amazing. I am now fully qualified to come up here and talk to you about a woman in the media, talk to you about broadcast journalism, some of the ethics and some of the precepts. That's terrific. 7 years ago, nobody would give me a job. I graduated from Ithaca College, and despite the fact that during my tenure in Ithaca had worked for the entire 4 years commercially, and I traversed the whole nation looking for work, I finally got a job at CBS in New York, which sounds like a terrific job. You'd all like to work for CBS in New York someday, right? When you consider that I went to work for CBS New York as a gopher. Jessica go for the wire paper, Jessica go for the anchorman's laundry, Jessica go for this and go for that. And there were male gophers on the staff. But all of the male gophers got to ascend up the ranks and go into other jobs. And all the women gophers continued to go for coffee. And it wasn't even easy to get a job as a gopher. Because first of all, you had to go through the people who said, well, you can't be a desk assistant because the hours are long. And I said, that's all right. I don't mind. They said, the hours are also late. You risk getting mugged in New York City late at night. I said, that's all right. I'll take the risk. And they said, well, we'll call you. Finally, they called me and they said, well, we've looked over your credentials. I was in graduate school at the time taking politics at night. We've looked over your credentials and we don't think we're going to hire you because your journalism background isn't strong enough. You've got television, radio background, but you don't really have a journalism background. So I was very upset, and the next day they hired a hardcore unemployed person who hadn't graduated from high school for the desk assistant's job that I wasn't bright enough or didn't have the journalism credentials that were good enough to get. What they really meant to say was, we don't want women desk assistants, we've never had any women desk assistants, and we don't want them now. 5 years before that point, they could have said that, and I would have gotten to go home and just live with that. But they were at the stage where they couldn't say that to me, so what they said was, your journalism background isn't strong enough. It was that nebulous that it was nothing that I could really pin down. My journalism background was certainly strong enough to be able to carry coffee. I was able to do that before I went to college. I am still fairly good at carrying coffee. After I got to New York City and went to work my way up, nobody would hire women, so I traversed the entire nation looking for work again and wound up in Houston, Texas. For so many years, people didn't want to hire women in communications simply because we were used to stereotypes. We had never seen any women in communications. We had never any reason to believe they would be good or not good. We just weren't used to seeing them there. Have you ever gone to a supermarket and bought a package and bought it for years and had the package change on you? It's disquieting. You're not really sure. It may be the exact same thing in the package. It may be an even better product in the package, but the package changes and the label changes, and it's disquieting for you. For so many years, we got our news in the news package. You turned on television, and the package was always white, was always male, and was always middle-aged. That was the news package. The avuncular Walter Cronkites of the world, and the Walter Cronkites on the local level. Not that there is anything at all wrong with Walter Cronkite, who was an excellent journalist, but that he was the only type of television journalist you saw. There were no other packages. I wanted to be an on-air reporter. I never even thought about being an anchor woman. I wanted to be a reporter. I was told that I couldn't be a reporter because it meant I had to carry the gear. In small markets, you carried the old Pro 6 Archon heavy cameras, and I was too small to carry the gear. I was also told that I would be put in dangerous situations that women couldn't handle. I was also told that when men did shoot film for me, they didn't want to shoot film for me in dangerous situations because they were afraid, being a woman, I couldn't handle myself. I had to go along and disprove all of those things. I got a job in Houston, Texas. I was the first woman street reporter that city ever had. There had never been a woman reporter on television in Houston. It caused a great deal of unrest in the newsroom. We worked in rotation. We carried our own gear. And the men in my newsroom used to do things like sabotage my gear. There was an unwritten rule in Houston where the first person on the scene had to set the lights at a press conference. The old you kids don't deal with this. We had the old Translux cases. You're so well equipped up here at Ithaca College, it's amazing. But we had the old heavy Translux light cases, and we had to carry them upstairs all by ourselves. And all the other crews from the other stations used to hide around the corner and wait for me to get there so that I'd have to carry all the lights up the steps and set all of the lights. And there were subtle kind of things like that. After 3 months, or 6 months rather, in Ithaca as a reporter, the weekend anchor job opened up. And there were 5 reporters on staff, 4 men, and I was on staff. And they put up a notice and they said, before we hire an anchor person, actually they said before we hire an anchor man, before we hire an anchor man from the outside, we'll audition all the reporters inside. And if anyone is good enough, we'll take one of our reporters and promote them. Auditions are Thursday, after the newscast. And after the newscast on Thursday night, I walked right by the notice. I saw it and went home. And didn't even think about going back and auditioning for an anchor woman's job, for an anchor job. And I went home and the news director called me and said, why aren't you here auditioning? And I said, I'm not here auditioning. They're auditioning because it's for anchor. And he said, so? And I had to sit down and think about that. So why not? And the answer was because I was a woman. I had never seen a woman in the job before. Therefore, I had no reason to believe that I even had a shot at it. Now, I sat down and thought about it and said, you know, I'm the best reporter they have on staff here. I'm better than those 4 guys that they're auditioning. Why am I here? I went back and auditioned and got the job, became the first anchor woman in the South. It is not easy to be a first in this industry. For one thing, you have to see yourself in a role. When I was growing up, I'm 28 years old, but I'm on the other side of the generation gap for most college students today. And when I was growing up, and anyone asked the women in our class what we wanted to be when we grew up, we all said one of 3 things: a nurse, a teacher, or a mommy, or any combination of those 3, and not, believe me, that there is anything wrong with any one or any combination of those worthwhile jobs, but that in all honesty, that was all we saw available to us. It never would have occurred to me to say, when I grow up, I would like to be an anchor woman. When I grow up, I would like to be Walter Cronkite. I noticed there were marked differences between Walter Cronkite and myself. And so without even engaging my brain or intellectualizing it, I knew that it would be a problem and that I couldn't be a Walter Cronkite because I was a woman. We have begun to change. I was asked today about stories, the type of stories we cover. Don't we in the news cover stories about men? And that is true. We do. Because news is geared to the power structure. And the power structure is stories about politics, is stories about medical breakthroughs, stories about social change, stories about people who occupy important positions in the power structure, and most of them were men. So sure, all the stories on the news are mostly about men, but that's changing. And the more women we see in power positions, the more stories we'll do about them. The more stories we do about them, the more kids growing up will see women in these different positive roles, will see themselves possibly ascending to a point where they are in those roles. And we will begin to then see more women on the news. It's a cyclical kind of thing. I would like to say that the industry is open to women completely now. I would also like to say that President Ford has come up with a cure to the economic situation, and that the Easter Bunny will be here on Easter. No, we are nowhere near where we should be. You are the ones who were beginning. You are the ones who were starting the change. I would also like to say that women got into the industry because everybody woke up and said it was unfair. That would be untrue, too. Women got in the industry because there were enough women who pushed for it, number one. And number two, in the late 1960s, blacks and racial and ethnic minorities pushed the Federal Communications Commission into adding an addendum to the FCC requirements, which said stations must file affidavits saying what they are positively doing to implement the progress of black, racial, and ethnic minorities. It excluded white women. You saw a lot of black women getting into television. You didn't see a lot of white women. In 1972 or thereabouts, the FCC amended that, and stations are now required to file affidavits to renew their licenses saying what they are positively doing to implement the progress of women, not only in their own shops, but in promoting positive images for women. That was really when the industry finally began to open up, and we are just seeing it open now. Still, the decisions that are made in the industry, most of the decisions are made by upper-level management. And that is the one area where you do not see women in television. Women in decision-making capacities, news directors, program directors, general managers, corporate vice presidents, presidents. You don't see women in those jobs, and there is where the decisions are made. You can only do so much in a line position. I can only do so many stories, promote a positive image by being the kind of anchor woman I think we should have. I can only do so much. Women like myself can only do so much. The rest has to be done by women who hope to enter management level. I hope that there are women in college now and communication schools that are looking toward television management. It is the one area where we so badly need women. I've also been asked by men on campus and men off campus, white males, how they can end discrimination against them. That now, with the push toward letting women in the industry, with the push toward letting blacks in the industry, racial and ethnic minorities, that the one person who's now in the minority and discriminated against is the white male. He can't get a job. He can't get in the front door. He can't be considered. And to that I say, I'm really sorry. And that's very true. This industry is so competitive. There are only a certain number of jobs out there. Nobody's going to open up a new station. Maybe there'll be some more jobs in industrial television, but there are not a lot of jobs. The competition is stiffer. True, they're opening up jobs to minorities, so therefore white men are pushed aside. My co-anchor, Mort Krim, lost a job to a black man at one point in his career. And it was a job he really wanted. And the program director took him aside afterward and said, Mort, you were really the best man for the job, and you should have had it. But you weren't black, and I had to give the job to a black person, and I'm sorry. And that black person came up to Mort afterwards and said, Mort, you were the best man for the job. I know that. I know I'm not as qualified as you are. And I'd like to feel sorry, but I don't. Because for all the years that you've been auditioning for jobs, I haven't been able to get in to see the news director. For all the years, all the people here that are not able to get jobs because they're going to women, I say, you at least are able to get into the program director. You're at least able to get in to see the news director. You're at least able to be considered. For years and years and years and years, we weren't even in the running. We weren't even considered. Last night I flew back to Philadelphia to do a show called The 53% Minority. It was about women. I had just finished talking to some women on campus. In the plane going back, I was reading about the women on the show. Flo Kennedy, spokeswoman for the women's movement. Nancy Wittig, one of the ordained Episcopal ministers in Philadelphia that the church has ousted and will not let practice. And a woman's psychologist who said that she is dealing with a lot of conflict, women who are in conflict, who say that they're succeeding and their heads are in the 1980s, but their guts are back in the 1930s, and they're having trouble dealing with the women's movement, etc. But it occurred to me going back to a show that, by the way, was produced by a woman and associate produced by a woman, and two of the people on the floor crew were women, and I was anchoring. It occurred to me that we have come very far, but that we have not really reached true equality until people are going to go into entry-level jobs, men, women, blacks, whites, whatever, are going to go in and look for these entry-level jobs, and people are going to evaluate them in terms of their excellence, in terms of their ability to do a job, and not on terms of whether they're white or whether they're black or whatever. And I think that when young children grow up and begin to perceive the news in all types of packages and people in all different kinds of roles, I think that is when we will have truly gotten to a point of real equality and liberation for all people in our own industry and in all others. I'd like to take a couple of questions. My management always makes me tell you that my opinions are my own and do in no way reflect the staff and management of Westinghouse or its parent company in New York. Let me take a couple of questions. Anybody? Can be on the industry or women's roles in the industry or lack of them or whatever. If you yell them out. In Philadelphia, the questions I always get are things like, where do you get your clothes? Who does your hair? And other incisive questions. It's a pleasure to be on a college campus where people have a working knowledge, or at least a rudimentary working knowledge of broadcasting, can at least formulate intelligent questions. Yeah. None of them are doing it right. You're all shy. Well, Dr. Kesh has given me enough time to do maybe one. You want me out here by 7:30, right? Go ahead.
Do you ever plan on having your own station?
I ever plan on having my own station. I should make that much money. It should only happen that I should make the millions of dollars necessary to buy a broadcast station. I would be really lucky if I could own a little teeny station in the Midwest. I'm toying with the idea of, well, there are those that say that my career will be over in another 10 years because old women are not good on television. Those are the same people that said that women's voices were non-authoritative and that women didn't like to look at other women on TV because they were afraid of losing their husbands. In other words, they were men that came up with those ideas. But possibly later on in my career, I'm looking for an alternative career after this one is over, in my mid-30s or early 40s. And I think I might try station management.
You don't hear Barbara Walters saying that.
No, you don't hear Barbara Walters saying that, but you hear an awful lot of people who say to me, what are you going to do when you get old? And I say, and when is that going to be? And they say, well, in another 10 years. I say, okay. In other words, it's attendant to what are you going to do when you grow up. Any other questions? Being an anchor person, do I miss the on-the-street reporting that I used to do? Most certainly. Unfortunately, our industry is set up in such a way now that you start out as a reporter, and if you do well at it, you become an anchor. And there's the glory, and there's the money, and there's the recognizability, and there's where everybody wants to be. So what you get to do is you get to read the news. The other day, a young kid gave me a great definition of what an anchor person does. Little kid in the third grade. Teacher asked him what an anchor person does, and the kid got right up and said, an anchor person is when you make a whole lot of money when you read all them words right on the television. And that's not all that far from wrong. Hopefully, you get to write. I write a lot of my own material, and I plan my day and I plan my schedule as such so that I can cover every once in a while a breaking news story and work over a period of time on investigative reports. And so therefore I keep my hand in reporting. But the industry is set up now that really you could become very easily Ted Baxter. You could especially at a major station where there are writers and producers, where you come in and get somebody to make you up and fix your hair and get your script and sit down and read the news and have no input whatever. That makes for a very shallow individual. It makes for a very two-dimensional individual. It doesn't make for a good news person. A good news person writes and also reports. I'll tell you what I really miss the most. I miss coming in the morning and going out and doing a couple of stories and meeting all different kinds of people and going through all kinds of challenging situations and hoping that I'll be able to get it together and get it on the air on time. I miss the challenge of that.
One of the criticisms of broadcast journalism now today is that people are looking for the star image rather than the journalist.
People today are looking for the star image rather than the journalist. Yes, unfortunately, that's true. We're getting into the showbiz area of news. There are those who say, to my face, that were I not a woman, I would not be making it now. There are those who say that were I not a somewhat attractive woman, I would not be making it now. To that I have to say that for a quarter of what they're paying me in Philadelphia, they get the prettiest model in town to read the news. They could get the prettiest model on the East Coast, maybe, for what they're paying me. I don't know, to come in and just read the news. There's an awful lot of premium placed on appearance. However, television is a visual medium. It's not radio and it's not print. Visuals are a part of it. It's like when you meet another person who's going to talk to you, you consider how they look, but it's a part. Television news is really, the presentation of television news is more the Gestalt theory, where looks are a part, where communicative ability plays a part, where real news skills and writing ability plays a part. All of it comes together and either works or doesn't work and is able to translate through a television screen and communicate with the person. It's a tough kind of thing to really break apart, but looks plays a part, and to some people who really are more interested in the superficiality of the industry, looks play an important part, a really important part. Yeah.
Do you feel you got your $20,000 from this school? Do you feel that
I don't think it was that much when I was here, because I know I wouldn't have been able to pay it. I struggled, too, with what I had to work with.
But do you feel the degree is as important?
The degree is as important. I'll tell you what is important. Television news is nothing if it does not cover people, if it does not involve people. All the stories you cover about people, people and their power structures, people and their relationships, people and their hang-ups, people and the interesting things that they do. In order to cover those people, you need the technical skills you have available to you, learning on a lot of technical levels that I didn't have at that point. But experience is important. A good education is also important, a good liberal arts education, because stories that you will be doing in news will be about history, they'll be about sociology, they'll be about psychology, they'll be about art. You'd be surprised how little bits of information come into play in stories that you are doing. That's really important. Get all you can out of the technical aspects, but be advised that when you graduate, you'll have to start very small. You'll have to get a lot of just good line writing experience at a wire service or reporting experience at a small radio station, and you'll have to work your way up city by city. But never underestimate what education does. If you hand the degree to somebody, they're going to say, so what? But it's what went behind that. It's the education and the background, the sum total of experience that you then bring to the stories that you do. Yes?
Do you see the industry also being open to women as far as camera and technical things?
Yes. Is it open insofar as camera and technical things? Well, here we have the women who are on camera here, cameras 1 and 2. TV Guide just did an article about my station. It was written by a woman who was a camera person, studio camera person at my station. She's about barely 5 feet tall. She has to weigh all of about 90 pounds. She's very small, very attractive, very nice, very bright, very articulate, good camera person. She's worked her way up to director. It was all about my station. And it was about one night, my co-anchor and I we were anchoring a newscast one night. I was anchoring Mort. And on camera 1 was a woman, and on camera 2 was a woman, and there was a woman running the teleprompter, and there was a woman floor person. And there was a woman upstairs on the videotape machine, and there was one on the slide projection. There were a lot of women on the crew. We have a lot of women, technically. And Mort was doing a commentary. He does commentary, and he was doing a commentary on increasing jobs for women. And as he was reading it, I was over there going like this to the women on the floor, and they were all applauding, and you could hear yelling through the headsets. And all of a sudden, Mort finished his commentary and started laughing, and I said, you see, you're doing your commentary, and the studio is unmanned again tonight. There just were no men on the crew. We have a lot of people who take over technical jobs. We have women directors, women producers, women associate producers, women researchers, women on camera, women on sound gear, women on projection, women on teleprompter. We have women in all aspects, and most stations do, and they handle the job beautifully. They're in the union. They're called their union brothers, and because it's still the brotherhood. But they have the jobs. They're holding them down. They're doing very well. It's opening up. As I say, the one area that you're going to have a tough time in is upper-level management. Any other questions at all? Thank you very much. I have enjoyed this. I wish each and every one of you good luck. And I want to add that the industry, like McLuhan says, is the fastest and most expedient way of reaching the largest amount of people ever known. It changes constantly. You will be a real working part of that change. Since we are not governed and we are only regulated by the FCC, so much of what we do, whether we're good or whether we're bad, depends on decisions made at individual levels and commitments made at individual levels. You will be a real working part of changes in our industry. Do what you can with what you have, where you are, work your way up, and plan on an individual level what you want to make as a contribution. The industry is crowded, but it always needs good people. Thank you. And now if somebody will help me get out of
is that the problems are not as readily identifiable as they were earlier. Before, people told you, oh, you can't have the job, you can't do this work. Now, it's a little more covert. You see women in beginning jobs, you see women in middle jobs, but there are very few women in the upper reaches of the power structure where the real decisions are implemented.
How do you think this is impacting on the men in America?
I think there's a lot of resentment, and I think that some of it's justified. I think that whenever a woman gets a job solely based on blue eyes over gray matter, that men have the right to feel that they've been discriminated against. On the other hand, if a woman gets a job and her qualifications and experience and ability are commensurate with any man who competes against her, then it's the man's problem to deal with it.
What about women in management, in news? There are, of course, those of us on the air now in the local level and on the network level. But what about managing the news directors and the executive producers?
Not nearly enough. More than that, not nearly enough in upper-level management. Never mind in news management. Not all decisions about news are completely made by news management. The line decisions, but some of the major talent-choosing decisions are made by people even above that. At least they have an input. And the length of the newscast is not necessarily determined by news management always. I mean, our news management, I fought long and hard for an hour news, and if it had been up to our news management, we would have gone to an hour news a long time ago, I'm sure. The managerial level is the last bastion to be penetrated by women in broadcasting. We got on in front of the camera, there were those behind the camera, there were those in floor crews, but the upper reaches of management is really where the decisions for programming and news, all those decisions are made. Now, we at NBC have women executives, we have a woman vice president, we have women in charge of on-air news promotion and all of the news promotion. And we have women producers, although we have no major women executive producers. They are primarily male. And that's about the same as all networks. In fact, NBC may be a little more enlightened than the other two. But it is not because there's a bias necessarily against women, but women have only recently been afforded entry-level jobs, and they've only recently had an opportunity to manage stations and work their way up. I think we'll see more women in management in the next couple of years. Good news mix would be a good, solid network news, and then a station that is involved in the community, knows the people, knows the makeup and the ideas of that particular community, and reflects it in their on-air news broadcast. So you get a good look at a network and world and national news picture, and then it's intermingled with the local view of the news, and that's what really it should be. As to whether it's taken more seriously, both should be taken seriously. What happens in city government is no less important to you watching a television set than what happens on Capitol Hill or in any world capital. You should be as concerned as to what happens across the street as you are across the continent. or across the world. One of the things that you don't see in local news, unfortunately, in this industry, it's axiomatic, to move up is to move out. If you start at a local station and you go to a bigger station and a larger station than that, and maybe you go to the network. And so you don't necessarily get people on the air that are from the community. You and Jack being from the community would have about the best chance of anybody of knowing what reaches and affects the people in your coverage area.
Jessica Savitch is currently the anchorwoman on NBC TV's Saturday Night News. She has covered the Senate while a reporter for NBC in Washington and is currently writing a biography entitled Anchorwoman. Please welcome Jessica Savitch. Hi. How are you? Nice to see you. You look terrific.
Thank you very much. This is my sitting on an open set outfit.
What do you mean by that? I was going to say that doesn't look like, for example, Irving R. Levine wouldn't come out here dressed like that.
No, Irving would wear the same thing, but would have a bow tie right here.
Now, what does that mean, your open set outfit?
Well, this is an open set, meaning that you can
anything
see,
goes.
Yes. Well, no, it's that too, but you can see your legs. And television used to be being disembodied head like this, see, from here to here. And so therefore your legs don't show. You can wear whatever you want or sit on your feet or do anything you want.
Now, were this a closed set, what would you be wearing?
I would probably be wearing jeans or something like
Really?
that, dressed from here up.
Is that true?
Yeah, yeah. Because the reason is you want to be comfortable when you're on television or wherever, and you want to be able to feel at ease. But unfortunately, when NBC News had an open set like this, it changed it. We had that for a while at Nightly News.
So you would have to come fully dressed. Was that ever a problem?
Yeah, I always came fully dressed, not dressed up.
Wait a minute here. That didn't sound proper.
I came
fully
dressed,
You're
but
fully
I wasn't dressed up. I didn't have clothes that matched on the bottom. They were different color by the time. The top would be very light and the bottoms would be dark.
Was this ever a problem
Yes,
when
it
you
was.
began doing this?
It was. My first network show here 3 years ago, I really had to decide, because you sat like this to the side, kept your legs together and read the news like this.
You mean, wait a minute, you read your news over the shoulder?
Well, I
like
did,
that?
because I was afraid to move to the front, because I had this habit of sitting on my feet like this or whatever. So I had to think about it, so I asked my mother what I was going to wear, and she said, not slacks, that's not good.
No.
So she said, you have to wear a skirt. So I wore a skirt, and I was so worried that I taped my knees and my ankles together, so that I would not move my legs, and it worked terrifically. It did, till the end of the show. When I got up and fell.
But no, you're kidding about that.
Really.
You actually...
I actually fell. Fortunately, we...
No, wait a minute. You're ahead of me. You actually applied tape?
You know the gaffer tape we use in TV that mends anything but broken hearts, you know? You got that? You double face, it's just double face. This is not it, David, but you can make it double face by doing this. Here you go. Here you go. Now it's double face.
Yeah.
Like that. A roll out of it so that your knees get taped together. This got very old very soon, so I started wearing culottes like this.
Would you be more comfortable if we went ahead and taped you up?
It depends who did the taping, I guess.
Hey, wait a minute.
Also, wait a minute. I'm not very comfortable anyway. I'm ill at ease.
Oh, no, don't say that.
No, I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry. I was really looking forward to doing the show, too, but I'm very ill at ease now.
Would it have anything to do with the duck or the guy from Wyoming, or...?
No, Baggs, Wyoming isn't as bad as coming from Kennett Square, Pennsylvania. I think it's smaller, but...
Is that where you're from?
Yeah, but that's not it. I found the format sheet. We all use... NBC doesn't afford 2 dressing rooms, so we all use the same one just for makeup.
And taping.
Yeah, and taping. And here's the format, and it says interview with Jessica Savitch and interview with Jessica Savitch, and then down a little further, and it says Jessica continued or Bob the dog. You can't see this. So this means, folks, if I do well, I'll be back for segment 3, and you'll know if I don't do well because Bob the dog will be there.
Okay.
Who's Bob the dog?
Okay, if we have the Bob the dog tape loaded up, we're...
Who's Bob the dog?
Now, you don't want to hear about this, but it was certainly not meant as an affront to you. A while back, the head writer on this program thought it would be funny to produce some films from a dog's point of view. And there is mixed opinion as to whether or not this would be suitable television for North America. And as a result, it's kind of an ongoing discussion as to whether or not this will ever see the light of day. That's
well,
what that meant.
Just in case I don't make segment 3, this is my dog, Chewy. He's a terrific dog, and every bit as good as Bob.
That's a handsome-looking dog, and not...
Thank you, very nice dog.
Not unlike Bob the dog himself.
But better than Bob the dog.
No, not better than Bob the dog. Wait a minute, you. We're going to have to go away for a moment, and Jessica Savitch and I will return, covered with tape, right after this. Jessica Savitch, of course, is here, and we were talking earlier about you taping your legs in. I want one more kind of silly thing out of the way, and then we'll get on to or maybe we won't. We'll see. Now, there was this poll, apparently, that called to my attention earlier this morning. Some company polled various newscasters around the country, and we all know how painful that can be.
Were you asked?
No, I wasn't asked, but they found you to be now, what?
The second.
You want me to say it?
Yeah.
They found that you were named the sexiest newscaster on television.
This was by my peers, so they should have known better.
Now, how does that make you feel?
Well, the first time I saw it, I heard about it on a local news station here in New York, and I'm used to reading the news, and there was a chroma key behind me, which is that picture in the box, and I was the picture instead of the person at the desk, so I thought I had died, and nobody notified me or something. You know, and then when I found out what it was, I thought, well, I don't know if it's a compliment or not. I mean, it's supposed to be a compliment if you're recognizable. Dan Rather was the one for male anchors, so you figure he's a good
Dan Rather is the
Dan
sexiest?
Rather, yeah, sexiest male anchor according to this poll of news people locally.
Where did John Chancellor come in?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't check it beyond that.
Yeah.
You're just supposed to check and see if your name was mentioned or something. No, I don't know. They didn't mention who was second and third. They just mentioned who got. But I figure Dan Rather is a good journalist. Roland Cronkite was mentioned as the most trusted, and it mentioned some other anchor people in the network, all of whom were good journalists. So you figure, well, that's in addition to the other, okay.
See, that's a lot of places people would think, well, you can't be the sexiest and also the best journalist reporting either.
Well, that belongs to the school of thought that says that all people who are blonde and on television news are therefore not good journalists. The definition of a good journalist being someone who is not blonde on television. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Yeah,
but now that I know of a case, a city where I last lived had that problem. They had cheerleaders doing the news. Now, this both male and female. It was like Barbie and Ken bring you the news every night, and but.
I don't agree. Okay, I don't agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have them now. But I have ultimate and unending faith in the television viewing audience. And I think they know when somebody is broadcasting to them in 2 dimensions, horizontal and vertical. And if you know what you're talking about, you come across in a 3rd dimension. People who come off the cheerleading field or the beauty contest runway do not necessarily bring that, more likely don't, to their jobs. And I think there's a difference, and the television viewer viscerally knows that.
I agree, by the way, and I'm glad you brought that out. Now let's talk about Barbara Walters. Now, was she the first, I don't want to refer to as a pioneer, that makes it sound like...
but that's what she's called, and she is.
She is a pioneer.
Sure. I mean, anybody who goes into uncharted waters and does something for the first time is therefore probably eligible to be called a pioneer or barrier breaker or whatever. So sure.
And she opened up the area of news in general. Were there not any women in TV reporting?
There were a few. When I was growing up, there were 1 or 2, but that was all. And most of them, although they were good, I think, didn't get on the air with frequency and didn't get on the air with the major story of the day, did not have a chance to engender viewer loyalty or prove themselves or become good journalists in the eyes of viewers, and so therefore their careers didn't last all that long. Given the same opportunities men had, they would have lasted. Barbara Walters took her opportunity, was a researcher, and parlayed it into an anchor person.
Now, I guess there would be some who would argue that while she was an anchor person, she was not a successful anchor person.
Does that mean all women aren't?
Well, no, but what I was going to say was, at the time, she was coupled with Harry Reasoner, who I guess you could say also was not a successful anchor person because that union came apart and they both went their separate ways. But he, of course, is a success, and she certainly is a success.
Exactly. I mean, if everybody tells me, well, Barbara Walters failed as a primetime anchor, so no other women can do that. That's the every woman theory. Why does that mean because she didn't, someone else can't? Besides, if we're all going to fail, let's fail like that.
Yeah.
That's terrific. Being a good anchor person doesn't make you a good reporter, and vice versa. They're separate skills.
What was working in Washington like? Was that... is that the place to be if you're a news person, Washington?
That and New York. If you're going to cover network news, it's primarily politics. That's out of Washington.
Yeah.
That'd be the place to be.
Okay, I hate to do this. We got to pause here, but I want to find out some more interesting stuff, as we say. I am the only one who says that, by the way. More with Jessica Savitch. Right after this. Jessica Savitch is here. Bob the dog is not with us. We'll reschedule him at a later date. Anyway, when you were in Washington, did you go to the press conferences and ask questions of the presidents?
I did the press conferences, but I did them from the studio. I did the wrap-up afterwards saying, in case you tuned in late, what the president said was. I don't like the press conferences.
Have you ever asked a president a question?
Sure, I have, in other situations and in impromptu press conferences. But you don't get a lot at these press conferences. You really don't. Because what happens is everybody wants to get their question in, so it doesn't make any difference whether the president should declare war or what he wants to say.
He didn't do that, by the way, did he?
Oh, no,
good.
He didn't. No, he didn't today, I don't think.
But maybe we ought to phone the newsroom.
No, I don't think so. We wouldn't want to know, I guess. What happens is there's no follow-up question, so somebody can then ask about grain price supports in the Midwest, regardless of what he just said.
Oh, I see. So you could ask him anything, and then they would move right along. Yeah. But do you feel like a duck standing up there saying, asking the president a question?
You try not to think about that. You really try to think about the question. You try to ask what the person at home would ask if they were going to the press conference. Yeah. And you try not to think it's the president. If you start thinking, gee, it's the president, maybe they're not asking this.
Yeah.
Don't think about that.
Now, what about President Reagan? You can't make an assessment of him,
no,
can
that's
you?
one of the things we can't. I can not here.
Yeah.
I can privately. I can have my own opinion, surely.
Okay.
But I can't do that here because I'm supposed to be able to cover news objectively.
So we'll all go back to Jessica's place after the show.
Sure.
Still badmouth the Reagan administration. No. Listen, it was a pleasure meeting you, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
It was a pleasure being here. Like the show.
Jessica Savitch. We'll be back after station identification with cartoonist Simon Bond and a George Washington's birthday play with the students of PS 84. Hello. Welcome back to the show. My next guest is an NBC News correspondent and anchor of the NBC Nightly News every Saturday. Yes, I know it's confusing. She'll explain. She is also the author of the soon-to-be-published book, Anchorwoman, of which I am holding a copy in my left hand. We are delighted that she's back with us tonight. Please welcome Jessica Savitch. Hi. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
That's a great looking cover there for your book.
Thank you. We had a great stand-in for this
cover.
No,
that's you. Now, should we explain why you didn't come out here on your own power?
Well, I guess we have to because my foot's wrapped like this, and only a fool would wrap their foot like this for the David Letterman show. At least they'll use a classier-looking bandage anyway. I have a great story that concerns a chandelier, a lot of guys, but it
Well, now we're getting somewhere.
But the fact of the matter is I just put a chair down and was reaching for a shelf book and fell over and just tore cartilage in my leg.
Oh, my.
Fortunately, we don't anchor with our feet unless we put them in our mouth inadvertently.
But painful nonetheless, I'm guessing.
Only when I'm breathing.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you bit the bullet. Is that what they say when people
bite the bullet? Better than biting the dust, I'll tell you.
Now, this Anchorwoman, now, this is not a novel. This is...
No, and it's not an autobiography either, although everybody says it is, and it isn't. It does not talk much about my personal life at all, or my career. And the only reason that's of interest is because I started out in 1969 when everybody said you have your job because, in spite of being female, and went through the stage where everybody said you've got your job because you're female. And a lot of the changes that went on with regard to women in television news have had an impact on society overall in role models for women and acceptance for women in all kinds of jobs. I kept notes from the beginning, and I just thought the time had come, and 2 years ago I started work on the book. And it's coming out September 20th, published by Putnam.
Now, is this in response to letters that people write in asking you for advice, or is this just general how to become a
No, and it's not even asking for advice. It is that inadvertent title of role model. For some reason, when you are a first or among the first, because I was certainly not the first, but among the first, they assume that because you can do the news on television, you therefore must have the answer to everything from how to get a date to how to cure the situation with regard to the Middle East. And they also assume that you have a perfect life. And I wanted to let people know that it is a job, it is a career, it is tough, and it doesn't mean your personal life is happy just because you do well on the air.
Now, when women, men and women, when they do ask you, how can I get to be, I'm getting out of college whenever they get out of college, I want to be Jessica Savitch, what kind of questions do they ask you?
Well, I tell you, I teach at my undergraduate school, Ithaca College, and my students all ask me that, and I say, don't do it. And every one that disregards me, that's the one that does and succeeds.
Yeah.
There is no one set pattern. When we started out in the business, you went to a small market, you worked your way up, etc. Now, sometimes if you look good and you can read the words well on camera, doesn't matter if you can write, doesn't matter if you want to report or interview, you get the job. I wrote the book for that reason, too. Those people don't usually succeed, and I think we'll find that true over time. I also want to answer myths. Earlier, I was told women didn't get jobs because their voices weren't authoritative and women didn't want to watch other women on TV. They were jealous. They said, at 11 o'clock, there's this woman, she's all dressed up, and I'm at home with my rollers. I don't want to watch this. Turn that woman off. You always wonder what he looked like at that time. At any rate, those myths are over, and the new myths are women can't get old on television, or women have to be knockout glamour symbols to get jobs on television. I wanted to dispel those myths. My belief is
but
that...
see, excuse me for interrupting, but since you are glamorous and a knockout, it's...
Oh, David, now that's the when did you stop beating your wife question.
See, now it's difficult for people to say, oh, sure, she's got it all, but...
Thank you very much. I appreciate the compliment, but the makeup people work long and hard here. Wardrobe and hair, too. It's visual. It's a visual industry. You have to look pleasant enough to be disregarded and let them listen to what you're saying. You don't have to be a knockout glamour symbol. What you have to be is three-dimensional. Horizontal and vertical have to look appealing, not overly appealing, but you have to have that third dimension of... Serious answer here, folks. You have to be able to come across in a third dimension, to know what you're talking about and communicate that. And viewers may not know that intellectually, but viscerally they sense that.
Let me ask you, I was reading some information about this very project this afternoon, and occasionally people will ask you what your dress size is or where you buy your blouses.
Not occasionally.
Frequently?
Not frequently. Every day.
Every day.
Every day.
Now,
among the 60 letters a day about how-to and all that, by the way, we didn't quite answer that. The how-to is, there's no how-to.
Yeah.
You go out, you learn your trade, you apply your skill, and with luck and timing, maybe you'll make it. Do they ask me those questions? Yes, they do.
Now, your complaint, and it's absolutely true, is they probably don't ask Roger Mudd where he buys his suits. They probably don't ask Roger Mudd what size shirt he wears or whatever.
I don't know whether they do or not. I tend to doubt that. I do know that whenever anything about me is in a paper, not that it's an everyday occurrence here or anything like that, but occasionally they'll call me a news girl. Jessica Savitch, news girl, said today, I'm 34 years old. Yeah. See these euphemistic laugh lines here? It's crow's feet. I'd like to see them say, Tom Brokaw, newsboy, said today... Actually, I don't want them to say that, but I'd like them to recognize that past 21.
Let me now. We're running desperately short on time, and I wanted to ask you about other. Now, women. No. It's not your fault. Women are imitating you now, aren't they?
I'm told that.
Now, when you see someone and you think she is imitating me, what things is she imitating?
This is a question makes it seem like that women are imitating me. I have heard this, I have read that.
I mean,
okay.
Anchor women, people working around the country.
Well, what I think is, why are you imitating somebody who said Jessica Savitch until she was 16 years old?
She had a speech problem.
That would be a conservative estimate, yes. And I have the too precise speech of somebody who had had a lot to overcome. I dressed the way I would have dressed had I become an attorney or a doctor or a homemaker or any combination. Why are they? Since television is a true mirror of reality, why not be what it is you are? Viewers are more likely to accept that. I don't need to tell you that.
Well, I think you do a wonderful job, horizontally, vertically, any way. The book is called Anchor Woman. Jessica Savitch, thank you very much for returning. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. We'll be back with Toots Thielman. That was 1 year ago tonight. Let's meet the stars of that grand occasion. First, Jessica Savitch, ladies and gentlemen.
Nice to see you, Jessica. Have a seat if you will. Now from PS 84, John Frankie and David Jeffries, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see you. Have a seat, sir. How do you do? Have a seat if you will.
First of all, welcome back. We're happy you could be here 1 year later. And on the telephone, live from London, England, I believe we have Mr. Simon Bond. Hello, Simon. Oh, it's working just perfectly now. Is Simon there, please?
He is, David.
Oh, Simon, nice to hear your voice. I tell you what, since we have you on the phone, we have the other members of the show cast here. Do you have any memories of that night that stick out in your mind, Simon?
I just think it was the after the show party, which was so terrific, David.
Uh-huh. And how about dinner? Did you have a nice dinner after the show?
Well, I'm still waiting for NBC to pick up the tab. Is this the call telling me I've got it?
Oh, well, we'll look into that a little bit later, Simon. Hang on, I'm going to put you on hold. Hang on, Simon. That's Simon Bond, of course. Now, Jessica...
I didn't get invited to the party.
No, there was his attempt at a joke. Now, what are your memories of that night?
Well, I was very, very nervous, as a matter of fact. It was the very first time I'd been on a show of this nature, interviewing. And I came into the makeup room, and I thought, well, I was going to try my best. And I found the rundown sheet from the show. And it says, remember this, February 22nd?
Yes, I certainly do.
Everybody? It's great. First segment, it says main titles. David comes out, does his opening remarks. That went just fine. New gift items. Then we have interview with Jessica Savitch in one position. And the next break, we have interview with Jessica Savitch continued. And then we have this one down here, which says Jessica continued or Bob the dog.
That's right.
And so I knew, there was no pressure there. I knew that if I didn't do well, that Bob the dog would be here. Yeah.
But you
Is he here this week?
No, Bob's not here. You did just fine.
Thank you.
And as a result, you're part of broadcasting history. Let me ask John and David, what was so funny that was going on there? Who was it that started laughing? Was it you, John?
Oh, no. It was me.
Oh, okay.
Adam, I looked at his face. He was laughing at the time, and then I started to laugh out, too.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And that's pretty much the story behind that, huh?
Yeah.
And do you have any memories of the big event? Were you a little nervous?
Yeah, it was a lot.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming back here. It's pretty exciting here tonight, isn't it?
Yeah.
But we're not done. We have a very special surprise. You'll never guess who is going to be here. This gentleman is a very important and respected executive at NBC. He decides which shows are made here in New York and which shows are canceled. Ladies and gentlemen, and assembled guests, please welcome the Director of Programs for the East Coast here at NBC, Mr. John Moss.
John, nice to see you. Nice to see you, sir.
Hi, Jessica. Hi, David. Hi, John. First of all, I want to congratulate you on the success of this show. It was terrific. It set a standard for this show. We're all very proud of the network of last February 22nd. And it really is what this show is all about. And to thank you, I brought some commemorative gifts, everybody. An NBC decal.
Oh, good. Good. Did you hear that, Simon? You're getting a decal. You can put it on your car or your window, anything.
And
it's a decal. It's lovely.
And a peacock pin.
Oh.
Okay?
And you're getting some cheap jewelry also.
Oh, really? Is it in gold or silver?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I just know where to put this. I'll hang it up.
Did you say you just know where to put that?
Yes, I do.
I bet she does. Okay.
And we thought that maybe as a surprise you would like a tour of backstage to see what really goes on in a
Oh,
network
a
show.
backstage tour.
Would you like to see that, Jessica? David, would you like to see it? John?
Oh, that's exciting. A backstage tour.
And I've got these for Simon if he ever decides to come to New York.
Okay, I'll hold
You'll
those
hold
for
on to
Simon.
them?
I'll hold them for
Okay.
Simon. Thank you very much, John.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you for the
Congratulations
thank you
again,
very much, and
dear.
thanks
You
for
wanna
the
come
tour.
this way?
Yes,
Going on a
thank you.
tour
You wanna
now.
come?
Thank you, Jessica. Nice seeing you again. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
The makeup room.
Okay, Simon, they're going on a tour of backstage, and we'll get your
This is
pin
the
and your
makeup
decal
room?
to you as soon as we
Yeah,
pay
this
for the
is where
meal.
we produce the
Okay,
makeup
take care.
powders.
Bye-bye. Okay, well, there you go. It's our
puts on
fabulous
David's makeup
February
every day.
22nd,
There's
1982
our
reunion.
NBC Family
We have to go
Gallery
away
over
for
here.
commercial. We'll be back
Jessica,
with
this is where we have
Hunts
pictures
Hall.
of all our stars. This is Tom Gallery, one of the writers. The mirrors that David looks into and Paul. And right outside we have Johnny Kaplan, who's our favorite page over here. And this compresses some air. NBC garbage cans. I don't know what this is. This is a boom mic. Somebody sits up here, rides the boom. This is the show. This is Howard Bennington, who does sound effects. Can you just take this for a second? Want to try this? Jessica, you want to try? This is Howdy Doody, who was shot in the studio. This is one of our lockers, props, a little spray. This is gel. This goes in the lights to make them color. See what it's made out of? Oh, it's getting great. I want to show you the catwalk. This is the
in that, meaning that there'll just be a test, and that they test audiences in terms of responding, and a lot of the star quality that's applied to men will be applied to women, and ultimately someone will say, well, I just think this is a prettier woman and we ought to give her a shot, in the same way that men get replaced and still do get replaced.
There will be a lot of that, but the fact of the matter is, and John Chancellor has a very good statement on this.
John Chancellor.
John Chancellor, or John Chancellor, whichever you prefer.
I know, it's a joke, I think, that he changed his pronunciation of his last name when he took over the show by himself. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
Well, let's make it John Chancellor. You're absolutely right. At any rate, he has this terrific statement where he says that 90% of the time it's like being a preacher and it's services as usual. You get up there and you do this, but then 10% of the time you're called upon to give something more of yourself. You can be pretty and read all the words right on television, but when it all goes down and there's no teleprompter and there is no script, you have to draw on whatever it is you do or do not know about the news events of the day. That's where they separated the men from the pretty men from the pretty boys, and the pretty girls from the pretty women. You can be attractive. Television is visual. It's part of it. It is not the total.
It is absolutely not the total thing. What about the difficulty you've had to confront with being attractive and being intelligent, and people not wanting to give you both of those things, assuming, well, a beautiful blonde can't be that smart?
This is the when did you stop beating your wife question, folks. If I answer this question, I made a de facto admission that I think I'm smart and pretty.
Well, I think you're smart and pretty.
Now, if I beg the question, then it looks like I'm fishing for compliments.
No, I asked the question. I think you're smart. I think you're pretty.
Okay, take
now,
me, babe.
What have you had to do? Have you had to work harder to prove your brains?
Sure. Haven't you?
Yes, absolutely. People don't want to give people credit for having a couple of different things.
My definition of a person who is thought to be a good talk show host, a good interviewer, a good journalist, is someone who's not attractive on television because they figure, gee, you know, that person's not too attractive. Ergo, that person must be a good interviewer. The fact that you're an attractive person and a good interviewer, you have to work twice as hard to prove you're half as good much of the time. And I think that's where there's true equality in television.
I also think that the people who are perceived by other people as being attractive are not walking around perceiving themselves in that same way. There's a big difference there. Let me take a break. We are talking with Jessica Savitch about her book. It is called Anchor Woman. We'll be back right after this. We're back with Jessica Savitch. Her book is Anchor Woman, and some of the proceeds of this book go to help other journalists. Is that not correct?
Yeah. As it happens, I'm on the board of trustees of my undergraduate school, Ithaca College, and students have lost their GSA loans. So in addition to figuring it was time to set the record straight on anchor
anchor women in this country, I figured it was about time to see if I could figure out how I could earn some money for those worthwhile journalism students who've lost their GSA loans, and so that's where part of the proceeds
So that's
go.
very good of you, I think.
Well, I was lucky. I had some breaks. I had a student loan. I had a veteran scholarship. And young people today, worthwhile journalism students, don't have the access to the scholarships I had.
You are not afraid to get personal in the book. Writing here near the end, you say, let's see, in interviews I gave early on in my career, I was quoted as saying it was possible to have it all: a dynamic job, which you have, marriage, which you have had 2 marriages, which you're no longer married, involved in, and children. But after years of struggling to make it to the top, I've begun to wonder if it was possible to combine a fully satisfying personal life with a successful career. And I get the impression from reading having read your book, that you're not so sure that you personally are going to be able to do that. Not that you're obligated to try to do it, but that maybe you're such a hard worker that it can't happen for you.
I don't think it's necessarily for me, and I don't think I hold myself forth as the prototype of what a woman's life will be in this industry. But in any industry, for any male or any female, we are in a time of transition. It's a tough time. All the old roles got thrown out the window. We can't be our parents, and we have nobody to base our lives on. Can we combine both? The answer, I think, is some people can combine both successfully some of the time, as long as both work hard at it, and then some of it is up to the serendipitous winds of chance.
Yeah.
It is not necessarily a given, but the possibility leads me on.
I conclude the book by thinking that I don't really know what you really want, though. If you're waiting for like a lucky, nice thing to happen in your life again, or if you're going to just knuckle down and really continue to be as relentless in the pursuit of having a great career as you've already been.
I don't think that it's mutually exclusive. I think that I can give as much as I would like to give and get from my career as much as possible. I do not think that precludes the possibility of a personal life. I think that you must work as hard at both, and then maybe it works out. We were brought up on fairy tales. We all thought we would get married or become successful and get our ticket stamp validated happily ever after. Happily ever after is a maybe, and it depends a lot on what you put in.
I found myself thinking, when I was formulating that I wanted to talk about this, that it's implicit in even asking this question, a certain sexist judgment on my part. I don't know whether or not I would ask a man really the same question. So I would like you to maybe analyze a little bit of the thinking that goes into why we somehow seem more concerned as to whether or not a woman can combine a successful career with a personal life than with a man.
Because, and I will make this profound statement now, there is a difference. Biology is the answer. If there are to be children for another generation, of the 2 of us to make this decision, if each of us decided we were going to have children mutually exclusive, one of us would need time off to go to the maternity ward, and it wouldn't be you.
But I would want to be there, though.
But you would want to be there.
I would want to be there.
You would want to be.
I want time off, too. I want equal treatment.
This is what I say.
No.
If there is to be a successful family life and community life, then we have got to make the sociological changes necessary. Yes, the female needs the time off to have the children, but men need the time off to co-parent if both are to work either through desire or economic necessity. There need to be, laws change rapidly, Bill, you know that. Social changes take generations. We are the generation to make the change.
I think the institutions...
I don't think it's a sexist question. I think it's fair.
I think it's a fair question, but I did find that that I was formulating a question for you because you're a woman, and I would not necessarily have formulated it for a man. I think that the institutions that we work for have to change. I think that there should be an NBC nursery. I'm perfectly serious about that.
I'm perfectly serious about saying you're right.
I think a woman or a man should be able to bring the children in, and there's a place, a preschool kind of place, so that you can spend a little time with them. And I don't think we should worry that somebody's not going to be as productive on the job because a child's in the building, because I think you'll be a lot more productive if your children are near at hand than if they're halfway across town or an hour up the Hudson Parkway.
Let me just tell you, we have our own, on the Weekend News, executive producer Tom Walzine and Richard Berman and Susan Dutcher and all of us on our Weekend News staff. We do that. If someone wants to bring their children in and crayon on the floor or whatever.
Right on the camera lens.
Right
Yes.
on the camera. Then bring them in. I find them more productive when we integrate the family element than leave them up there in the bedroom communities in Westchester County or New Jersey or wherever.
Well, as I was reading your book, I was wondering, as I got to near the end, what you were going to talk about with regard to the death of your husband, who committed suicide. It's a widely known thing. And I'm curious as to why you didn't write more about that.
I have a good reason. Long ago, and long precluding that event, I decided to draw a line. I felt I was doing my job on the public airwaves, and therefore I owed a degree of answerability to the public. Who is this person? What is her education? What is her outlook? What are her views? But I drew the line on what is personal. That was a personal event in my life. It was on record. It happened.
Yeah.
How I dealt with it, what led up to it, what happened, is mine to know, mine to work through, mine to deal with, and mine to explain only where it impacts on my work. I made the decision a long time ago. I've stuck with it, and I continue to stick with it.
Do you feel that you have healed substantially from this? Obviously, you're back at work. I'm asking a question based on an empathetical thing. If I had been in a situation like that, I have no idea how I would find my way out of it, probably through doing what I do, which is basically through work. At this point, I'm asking this question for people who care about you. How are you with regard to having gone through that trauma last year?
I'm obviously still here. I'm obviously still working. As with anybody who goes through any trauma in life, mine is just more visible than others.
That's right.
How does the plumber who has 8 children, whose wife is killed in a car wreck, how does he go on? The answer is sometimes he does and sometimes he doesn't. And sometimes he does so in a productive way and sometimes not so. I find that one of 3 things happen. You either go on and you exist, or you prevail. I'm shooting to prevail.
Good. Tell me what you're going to be shooting with the PBS. You're doing a series. What's it called? Frontline?
It's called Frontline.
Frontline for PBS. And this is a good thing that NBC let you sort of out of a contract to take a little time off.
Well, they didn't let me out of the contract exactly. I'm still going to be anchoring the Saturday news. I'm going to be combining PBS with NBC. The PBS series airs January 17th at 8 o'clock. It's 26 weeks of excellent documentaries. It's done under the aegis of David Fanning, who was executive producer of the award-winning series World, also did Death of a Princess, and fine staff that some of them work for Bill Moyers. It's going to be some of the finest investigative reporting. It's not in place of NBC. It's something commercial television does not do at this time. I'm in the unique position of being able to work for and with the people in commercial television and in public television. I was selected for the job, and I am unendingly fortunate about it.
Well, I only have about a minute or two here. I just want to fire a couple of quick things at you with regard to the business. How long do you think it will be before we'll see a 1-hour nightly news on Big 3 networks, if at all?
We're going to have to see. I don't know whether it will be 1 hour straight, but I think maybe in prime time. The days of the belief that the viewers do not understand that it's something that happens in Iran affects them directly is over. They know that it's going to affect them at the gas pump. There's more of a need for information. There's more of a need for time to include that information.
What is your assessment of CNN as it currently is on here in New York?
I think that CNN provides a worthwhile service. I think it's still in the process of changing and finding its niche. But what it has done is pointed up the fact that there is a need for more information and the public is ready for it.
Yeah. Well, I wish you good luck with your book. I'm very impressed, and I hope you continue to do good things in your career.
Thank you very much.
Jessica came to KYW where I worked before I went to North Carolina, so our paths almost crossed. I was
well, crossed at the party for Anchorwoman, my book, so there you go.
Fine book. I thank you very much for being with us. When we return, we have Hilda Madrid with an interview with Carrie Nye right after this.
The title Anchorwoman did not exist until my next guest became one of the nation's first. Also happens to be the title of her new autobiography. She's best known as the anchor for the Saturday edition of NBC Nightly News and daily NBC News Update. Here's Jessica Savitch.
Hello, Mike.
So nice to see you.
It's good to see you, too.
What is that commercial? You've gone a long way, baby.
Thank you very much.
When I last saw you, you were trudging around KYW in Philadelphia.
I was your opening act, and you didn't even know it.
I didn't even know. I read that in the book.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I was Mike's opening act. What it was everybody... sold out every day. People couldn't, just waited 2 years for tickets to the Mike Douglas show. Unfortunately, all of the women would use the restroom around 5 o'clock when I was trying to get ready to go on the air to anchor the news, so I used to have to elbow my way to the front.
I've seen that lady before. There you were in front
I
of
was
the
a
mirror.
warm-up.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm so pleased at what's happened. It wasn't easy, though. I read this. It was very difficult for you.
There have been a lot of changes. First of all, anybody that writes an autobiographical work at 34 would be presumptuous.
Yeah, it is a...
It's not really an autobiography. What it is a journey of a career. Where we were when I started out, when women were told, you can't have this job because you're female, your voice isn't authoritative, you can't work late hours, women don't want to watch other women on television. The stages we went through when they took women off the beauty contest runway and said, here, now you're an anchor, read the news, to where we are now, which is when we're finally beginning to be evaluated in terms of whether we can do the job or not.
Yeah, but there are several things that stayed in my mind. I did not know that when you became a hit in Philadelphia, that the opposing stations, said you'll love this, looked for a young lady that looked, and one of the prerequisites was they must look like Jessica Savitch. It didn't matter if they could talk, they had to look like Jessica Savitch.
It was flattering, but what it meant was that if a man did well on television, in any job, whether it was entertainment or news, if the man did well, I said, gee, he's a real talent. If a woman did well, it must be because of the way she looks. So we'll get somebody and dress him up that way.
I agree with you because I constantly hear people say things negative things about Barbara Streisand. And all she does when she does a picture is what any man, they'd say, what a gifted, what a talented man. Look at the way he can direct, he can write, he can do. But because she's a woman, for some reason.
It's one of the reasons why I wrote Anchorwoman. The roles are changing. It's tough to be feminine and authoritative. If a man is aggressive journalist, means he's terrific. If a woman is an aggressive journalist, what do you usually think of? It's not terrific. You've got to be strong and vulnerable at the same time, feminine and authoritative. It's tough. Roles are changing, and we're on the cutting edge of the change.
I love what the little child said to you. You were appearing in front of a class, and this little girl said, you weren't sure that the kids would know because they were so young what you did.
Right.
Correct?
It was called The End of the One-Room Schoolhouse in Nebraska, and I went to do a story for NBC magazine. And the teacher said, this is Jessica Savitch. She is an anchor woman. Do you know what an anchor woman does? And everybody puzzles. Little kid raises her hand and she says, I think that's when you get paid a lot of money to get dressed up and read all of them words right on the television.
Isn't that television?
Television. Exactly right. But she's right. That's what a lot of women think.
Sure.
Going into the business. It was to dispel that myth that I wrote Anchor
This
Woman.
little girl someday will be looking for your job, too.
Probably today. She's probably out there now. But there's more to it than that. It looks glossy, just like the show out here looks glossy and perfect, and everything goes just fine, and you have interesting guests like Sid. It looks excellent. But what about all the preparation? What about all the work? What about getting ready? What about all that goes on in the control room and the constant pressure? That's not readily apparent. It's the same with news. There are a lot of myths to be dispelled. Our industry has changed rapidly. My career and some of the other women in the front line, those careers have paralleled the change.
But anchor people, you know, around the country have become celebrities, not unlike stars like Sid Caesar. Now, the network's relying too much these days on looks.
I don't think so.
Rather than appeal and journalism.
I don't think so. There are two dimensions. Looks like there are two dimensions in television, right? But there's a third dimension. And the third dimension is whether you know what you're talking about, whether you've done your homework. You can look terrific and you can sound terrific, that's great. But if you don't know what you're talking about, if you're not a good journalist, eventually that comes across.
Was the time in your book when you said, now I'm a journalist?
Yeah.
Describe that time to me.
The time that I felt that I finally became a journalist was in Philadelphia, as a matter of fact, doing a documentary, a series, one of the first done on the subject of rape, where I saw a story that I did then viewed in legislatures in Harrisburg, in Trenton, and in Dover. And it became a catalyst for change. In other words, they viewed the series and they said, gee, we really need to change laws with regard to prosecution of rapists and treatment of rape victims. Anytime you can see a story directly translated into positive societal change, you can say, look, Ma, I'm a journalist.
That's wonderful. I got to ask you about the one thing that stayed in my mind, the time you were very ill, and the guy called you up at home and said, Jess, it's ratings time.
Yep. Well, you
I
were
want
at
you
the
to
station,
substantiate
Mike.
that. Wait till you hear this, Sid.
It's the truth. Ratings are important in stations. First of all, News Now sets the image for the station.
And news is where they make all the dollars,
that's right.
too.
It's often the only locally originated program. So it was ratings, and I had intestinal flu, and I said, gee, I'm not going to be in. And they said, gee, we're in ratings, you have to come in. And I said, well, it's bad flu, like sick flu.
Throwing up every half hour.
Throwing up, sick. So I got called every half hour, like, how are you feeling? Are you going to be able to make it?
Are you ready?
Finally, they got panicked, and they said, look, you don't have to write the news. You can come in, and if you're going to be sick, we've put a trash bucket under your desk. Do you think you can make it to the commercial break? That's how important ratings are.
Yeah, that was
That's
our
how important
station in
ratings are.
Philadelphia.
Yeah.
We'll be back with Jessica Savitch right after this. Kind of shelved this for a while.
I started writing Anchorwoman really 15 years ago when I started in the business as a disc jockey. And I kept notes and clippings and didn't really expect to write the book until I was much older than 34 years old. But the industry changed rapidly and roles for women changed, and so I started writing the book. And when my husband died, I put the book aside for a while. But it, like my work, proved a panacea. It's always been something that I love. Broadcasting's always been something
It was
I
a
love.
terrible period in your lifetime, too.
No more terrible, though, Mike, than the periods of time that just about everybody goes through. Everybody in life has a bag of bearable sorrows that they take with them.
Yeah.
And they have a lot to overcome. First, you either decide whether you're going to go on or not go on, and then whether you're going to exist or prevail. Taking a shot at prevailing, went back and wrote Anchorwoman, continued to write Anchorwoman.
But what happened? Can you tell us a little about that? That
What
tragic
hap-
period in your life?
My husband became ill. It's a matter of public record. My husband became ill and ended his life in August of 1981. And the period thereafter was, as I say, no more difficult than that which is faced by just about everybody at some point in their life when they lose someone who's close to them. It's just that we do our jobs on the public airwaves, and so what we do, triumphs and tragedies, are visible, and how we deal with them, those triumphs and tragedies, are part of public awareness.
I think it was lovely how some of your fans responded to that. Some of the things they sent you was very, very nice.
They couldn't have been more kind, more supportive, and it was for that reason that you figure, well, there must be some meaning to it all after all, and you go on.
Mm-hmm. It's changed. It's been changing, and this man that I work for, Ted Turner, is responsible for a good many of the changes.
Yes.
CNN.
Yes.
More and more, there's more news on television than ever before, and since he started with the 24-hour news, all the networks have...
But he wouldn't have started doing that if there hadn't been a market for it.
Of course.
If it hadn't been that television viewers are no longer, nor should they be considered, the 14-year-old mentality. People don't understand when something happens over in Iran that affects them at the gas pumps. They know. There's a need, more of a need to know.
The proof of that is 60 Minutes being #1. It's been out for years and never gathered any strength until lately, and now the audiences are so hip. I know that when I make appearances, how smart audiences are. They know, they know all of the little expressions that we use. They know
all
what
in showbiz. The
sitcoms
United
are.
States is in showbiz.
That's right. And everyone everyone out there is a critic.
Anytime somebody is standing up and somebody else is sitting down, the one standing up's in showbiz, right?
That's right.
That's it. You've got to be able. Well, news is a commodity.
Also, remember our old boss, Don McGannon?
Yes.
He started all that, really, when you want to think.
Primetime access.
When he said primetime access, and when he said, I'm going to turn such and such a station to all news, I think it was WINS in New York, KFWB here, Paul Westinghouse station, everybody went, 24-hour news? Are you? In fact, I said, are you serious? There'll be a lot of repetition. He said, no, there's an audience for that. And they'll turn that radio on. They want to. He was right.
That rapidly changing technology means that 34, you can have a career that gives you enough information to put in a book like Anchorwoman. It means it gives you enough of an opportunity to do new things. I have an opportunity to do something new for PBS.
Oh, tell about that. That's exciting.
It's a documentary series called Frontline. I was very fortunate that NBC has given me a partial leave of absence, meaning I'll continue to do NBC's weekend newscast.
They're not thrilled about it, though, are they?
Well, they said you got to come back every weekend and do the news, but they're giving me a chance to do some investigative reporting. The series premieres Monday, January 17th on PBS. It's an hour-long documentary per week.
Are you into it already?
Yes, we're already researching and being shot by a consortium of some of the best producers in the business. David Fanning, who came up with the series World and did Death of a Princess. Irv Drasnin, who did The Guns of Autumn.
You're doing Sid Caesar's takes, Jessica.
I know. I tell you, you got to get chairs like this, that are better.
No, that's a good take.
You also don't get the ones that swivel like we used to have in Philadelphia, which is fortunate. We've knocked Sid off.
Yes.
This series is, I think, one that is going to go behind the headlines. I know it's going to go behind the headlines. Television network news gives you a very good headline service. They give you good documentaries.
But they do not deal in depth.
They cannot be set up to deal in depth. This is like an electronic Chautauqua-type tent, where we say, this is what you're going to see. You see the documentary, and at the end you bring in the protagonist and the antagonist and talk about it.
This is called being out of time. Anchor woman, Jessica Savitch.
I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
And Sid, thank you.
My pleasure.
Back. We'll do
We'll
do another one of these together, all of us.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd love it.
And tomorrow's guest, lovely actress Polly Bergen, and David Lander from Laverne and Shirley, whom you recognize as Swiggy, also the controversial co-author of the G-Spot, Beverly Whipple, and nationally known radio personality, Dr. Demento. Good night.
Jessica Savitch now occupies the chair camera left. She's done that before. She's been here in the role of interviewer, but this morning she is the interviewee. The subject, her new book. It is entitled Anchor Woman. It's the story of her rise from model to local radio DJ. She was known as Honeybee in those days, is that right?
Yeah.
She became the first television anchor woman in the South, and today she's an award-winning correspondent for NBC News. But you're still just a very young woman. Why are you writing a book?
Well, I'll tell you, I may be 34 years old, but the industry, within the span of the 12 years since I started in it, has changed. The roles for women have changed, and commensurately, the role models for young women growing up have also changed. Television's played a great part in that.
Who was your role model?
I didn't have one. I didn't know I was supposed to have one, but television has changed it. I mean, would either of us be in either of these chairs about 15 years ago? Probably not. What does that
say? Definitely not.
Yeah. What does that say to young people growing up? It says you're in this job and I'm in this one, and young people growing up can say, gee, we could have either one of those jobs or accept people in those jobs. We've gotten beyond the packaging to the subject matter that does or does not.
Raises a good point. There are some people who suggest that after the initial surge of hiring minorities, hiring women, that it has now fallen back a little bit, that now it's forgotten again.
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think we are finally at the stage, which is why I decided this was the point to write a book. That, and also I was trying to raise some money for journalism students who lost their GSA loans, which the profits of the book go to. We are now at the point where minority hiring has not fallen off. We have competition for males, females, blacks, whites, young, whatever. We're all competing for jobs. The public is always better served. I don't think anybody has to go out of their way to hire a qualified woman or a qualified minority.
We tend to think only of the present when we deal in this business. How tough was it in 1970 when you broke in?
Well, it was the stage where we had all the old myths. Women's voices are not authoritative. It meant if Bryant Gumbel said, there's been a fire today, everybody would say, that's terrible. And if I said there's been a fire today, they'd say, women don't know anything but grease fires in kitchens, you know. And then there was the myth that women wouldn't watch other women on television. All of us in the front line, Jane and Judy Woodruff and all of us that went into the business early on had old myths to fight. The new ones are that women can't get old in the business.
Then do you think they can?
Sure they can. Given quality airtime, quantity airtime, predictably over time to engender viewer loyalties, viewers will stick with you if you stick with your work.
How long did it take stay tuned. How long did it take for your peers and people you were dealing with to take you seriously? To say, hey, this is not just somebody
about
they
2
put in
hours
here
from now, I'm
because
hoping.
Oh, really? It's a never-ending fight? Is that what you're telling me?
It's a never-ending fight for all of us. But the truth of the matter is, we don't need to focus over our shoulders at our peers, and we don't need to focus down the hall at the management, no matter what the rating says. You focus through the tube, folks, and you deliver your best for the viewers. They'll take care of you.
I'm gonna ask you this one, and I don't mean to make it sound like a sexist question, believe me, but you brought it up in the book. You didn't really tie your ankles together when you first did your first. You did.
Nightly News. This was before the Today Show. They had the open set. This is before you were here. Jane will remember the open set. And it's, what do you do with your legs when you've been a disembodied head for years? You know, if you wear a dress, you won't have to worry about that. But if you wear a dress, you have to worry about how your ankles are going to be together during the broadcast. So I got the idea that I used double-face tape. And I taped my,
really?
I did. I was wonderful. The show was great. I stood up and fell on my face after saying good night. So it's true. There are a whole bunch of them. We've all got these stories in the business about teleprompters blowing up and things sticking together. And the material in the book is anecdotal. It's less autobiographical. It's not a how-to. There is no how-to in this business, but at least it raises some questions.
Well, we wish you luck, and you've obviously done well in this business, but if you're going to pump your book, you got to learn one thing. Bring a copy, hold it up as you're talking. You've obviously flunked. You have a lot to learn still.
I tell you, I did better on this side.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Brian.
We'll talk men's fashion in just a little bit. Jane will get into that with Gentleman's Quarterly. But first, we're moving past 7:50 on this Monday morning. We'll take a station break.